Good evening and welcome to Undoing I Do with Stephanie and Aday. I'm Stephanie Hunnell, the owner of the Hunnell Law Group in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and your co-host for this evening.
And I am Adela La Sherilyn Dow, the owner of the law offices of Adela La Sherilyn Dow in Staten Island, New York. It's been a long week, but I'm happy that it's Thursday and I'm here with you.
Happy Thursday.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good, but again, I'm happy that it's the end of the week.
It has been the last 2 weeks, I don't know if there's something in the air, the moon, or what. It's something. It's been a couple crazy weeks.
It really has been all kinds of emergencies. I have an emergency order to show cause tomorrow. I was filing emergency orders to show cause last week. I filed 2 of them last week. I mean, yeah, something's in the air. I think it was almost a full moon today. Maybe there's almost a full moon, or
Maybe.
if the full moon is tonight. Because as I was driving into the office today, I saw the moon in the morning, and it looked like it was almost full. That might be the answer to our questions. All of the stuff is coming loose. Yeah, so we have a great topic tonight, Steph.
We do. I have a couple of these cases going on right now, so this is a really timely topic.
And you know what? It's handled so differently across the 2 states. We are talking about joint physical custody and its impact on child support, its impact on your money.
Everybody wants to know the impact on their money. Every dollar counts these days.
That's right. I mean, I just filled up my gas tank and I swear it was $50-something. I can't believe it. I mean, what's going on? And I can't get any child support. Shoot. I'm still married. I mean, I wish somebody would give me some extra money for these kids.
There's got to be somebody you can call, right?
It has to be somebody. But yeah, we're going to talk about child support and whether joint physical custody impacts your money. If you know somebody who needs to hear this, should be watching this, is impacted by this, share our video, like our video, pass it along to a friend. You never know when you might be helping somebody out.
Exactly. And I know that there's been a lot of changes since COVID because people and kids haven't been in school. So parenting time schedules have changed a lot over the last year.
Absolutely. And that's a big impact in the state of New Jersey. The state of New York, not so much. But since you discussed that, I'm going to let you talk about the state of New Jersey because I like to do good news first and bad news later.
So in New Jersey, the way child support is calculated, I'm just going to start there, is there's a child support guideline. You plug in your incomes, you plug in how many overnights you have, you plug in whether there's health insurance, daycare, some miscellaneous expenses. And then the program spits out a number based on your income and what they have determined would be what an intact family would need to live on. And then it gets divided up depending on how much income you each make. Well, the number of overnights impacts pretty significantly sometimes how much child support you have to pay. So if you have the non-custodial parent, you have more than 28%, which is 104 overnights. That triggers a move from a sole schedule to a shared schedule. And what that means for your pocketbook means that the child support number goes down significantly. So if you're the primary parent, that is going to be less child support for you. If you're the parent of alternate residence, that's going to mean less child support that you have to pay. But the theory is that you're both having more expenses because you have the child more often.
So see, that's a difference, a big difference. So, when you break it down, you literally you're calculating in 2 different ways. So as soon as you have over 104 and over overnights, you go to a totally different calculation. You use a different worksheet. You have the shared parenting worksheet, and then the other worksheet, the solo parenting worksheet. But once you get to 104, even though it's not 1/2 of the time in the year, You got switched over to that nicer worksheet. And you know what else New Jersey has that New York doesn't have? That doesn't necessarily impact the issue of parenting time, but New Jersey has this cool little increase in child support for kids who are over 12.
Yep. So you get a bump up, oh gosh, 14%?
I'm not sure about the percentage.
It's something like I'll look it up in a second, but yeah, I think it's about 14%. But yep, because they say if you're paying child support, I don't know why I looked this up years ago, but you're paying child support because it's my job actually, so I do know why. If you're paying child support for a child that is, you're starting at a very young age, the child support goes up incrementally, and they're saying like over the lifetime of that family, that's why that's how the child support is based. But when they do the calculation and the child's over the age of 12, that wasn't necessarily built into the formula. So they they do that little bump up in dollars.
Yeah, so I just looked at the guidelines. It's 14.6%.
Okay. Yep.
14.6%, which could be some good money depending upon how much your support was in the first place. Mm-hmm. And again, to a lot of custodial parents, we call the parent who has custody in New York custodial parent. And in New Jersey, you call it the primary parent of primary residence. But to a lot of primary or custodial parents, that could make a difference. Absolutely. I think it is more expensive to raise an older child. It's probably more than the 14.6%.
Probably way more than the 4. These days, things are expensive. I don't even know when the last time they recalculated these guidelines. I know they do some increases every year, or they look at the numbers every year, but I don't know that they do a full-blown evaluation of what an intact family actually spends these days.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I don't think they have. I don't think that that inquiry has been made for many, many years. It certainly hasn't been made in New York for many years. Yeah. Our child support guideline is circa 1980.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And does your guideline, how does it treat overnights there?
Have fun with your kids overnight.
And it has no impact.
Them. Yep. Hey, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
It has absolutely no impact on support. Now, here's the thing. I have had rants about this, and I also had a case recently where my client has the child 47% of the time, and was ordered to pay full boat child support. And the case law in the state of New York actually indicates that unless you can really show that you're having some extraordinary expenses for the child while they're in your care overnight, and you also have this large additional amount of time, you're so unlikely to get a deviation from support. Not only that, you have to show that the extra amount of money that you're paying for Cindy, Susie, or Joe reduces the amount of money that the custodial parent has to pay for the children in some way, which is almost never going to be the situation.
Correct.
Right? And then the way New York deals with, so that's when you have the child a whole lot of time, but not 50%, right? Then in New York, even if you have the child for 50% of the time, whoever makes the least amount of money is going to be considered to be the custodial parent for the purpose of child support guidelines. And so that person is going to get a full boat child support order unless you can show that it's unjust or unreasonable, which is it's actually a pretty high burden. So generally, if somebody is trying to negotiate their support in the state of New York, they are so much more likely to get success if they do that just as a negotiation between the parties or the parties and their attorneys. I've been very successful at doing that, but you're going to be less successful at arguing it in front of a judge. And then this is the other thing about New York. What the judge can do is the judge can say, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to order full boat child support, but we're going to use the cap. So in New York, child support is supposed to be capped at $154,000 in combined parental income. Now that cap, it doesn't mean what lay people think a cap means. You put a cap on top of the Coca-Cola, and then if you shake the Coca-Cola, you hope that the Coca-Cola stays in the bottle. That's not what the cap means in the state of New York. In the state of New York, the cap means that the judge has to give whatever the statutory percentage is. So if you have one child, it's 17%. If you have two children, it's 25%, so on and so forth. Goes all the way up to 35% with 5 kids. Now, if you have more than 5 kids, we need to start talking about how you're going to have your own football team. But but the judge then has discretion if your combined incomes are above 154, and that number changes. Okay, that number changes upward, right? If your income is above the 154, the judge can say, all right, then we're going to attribute the statutory percentage to an amount above, but we're going to cap it. Let's say your income is 250. They might cap it at 200, or they might go to the full 250. It depends upon their discretion. They don't have to use the guidelines.
Wow.
So you might not know it's, and I'll tell you, it's going to depend upon the judge. This is why it's so important to hire matrimonial and divorce lawyers who deal with the judges day in and day out. Don't hire somebody who does criminal, PI, and matrimonial, and they do a little bit of public investigation on the side. Don't hire that person to do these kinds of cases, because if they don't appear before the judge, they're not going to be able to tell you what the heck is going to happen.
Right. They could go really wrong. I can see
it go really wrong. And there's some judges who will go above the cap. I'm thinking about one right now. And then there's some judges who almost never go above the cap. And then on top of that, we have something called add-on expenses, right? Same thing in New Jersey. The extracurricular, not the extracurriculars, the medical expenses and the educational expenses. Extracurriculars are folded into child support for the most part, even though there are people who have agreements otherwise. If you have an agreement otherwise, great, but most people don't have an agreement otherwise. And unlike New Jersey, 100% of the amount of add-ons is fair game for unreimbursed medicals, whereas in New Jersey, the custodial parent pays the first $250.
Right. Yep. I'm learning a ton. I can't believe how different it is. It really is night and day from New Jersey. So in New Jersey, I already said about the sole and the shared. Once you're into the shared worksheet, which is a different worksheet and different calculation. And again, that's based on 104 overnights that triggers it. And by the way, the judge does have some discretion depending on if the primary parent or custodial parent doesn't have enough income to go back to the sole guideline if they choose to do that. But anyway, so when we're getting closer and closer, we just add overnights into a line item, and then the calculation just moves over a bit, and you get some credit for the extra overnights that are had by the non-custodial parent. And then when you get to like a true 50-50, they theoretically run 2 guidelines as if each of you are the primary parent, and then they offset that child support number. So in theory, if you both have very similar incomes, you could end up paying 0 child support.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen in New York.
Right. That's wow.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And so that's why it's so important that if you are the person who earns the most money, and we call that the moneyed spouse, it's really important that you try to negotiate with your spouse and be on good terms, because it can be a very detrimental situation. Especially if you have a bad relationship. If you have a bad relationship, there is absolutely no impetus for your spouse, who is going to be the custodial parent, to try to work with you. None whatsoever.
Oh yeah, I can absolutely. And you're going to need them, because you need to know what their expenses are. But how else are you going to be able to prove that they have no change, that it's not going to impact the reduced amount of child support? Is it going to impact their expenses?
Yep, right? Exactly. And the thing, it's so different. It's just it's so different. It's amazing that we're neighbors, right?
Right. In the real world life, when you have your child 50% of the time, also your expenses increase. Again, I mentioned COVID, that things have changed a lot over, the last year, because people are sharing parenting time a little differently because of the school obligations. So I've spoken to several parents, several of my clients who, yeah, their electric bill is higher. They have 2 teenagers, and all of their eating out expenses, their food bills are higher. All of those expenses increase. And maybe you
Yeah.
have the same number of rooms and the same roof expenses, those hard fixed expenses, but the other ones move.
And so
And
what really sucks about that in the
uh-huh.
state of New York is that since there was never any flux based upon the overnights, if you're that parent who now has your children 24 hours a day because you're homeschooling them and they need to be on the internet and and then they're going into the refrigerator. I was going to say refrigerator like I was from Brooklyn, which I am. They're going into the refrigerator every single minute, right? Like my kids are always hungry. I do not know why, because they do get fed. So you don't get anything for that. The court is going to look at you and say, okay, so what would you like us to do again? We don't understand. What did you want? But at least in New Jersey, you can say, hey, but no, Nicole. At least in New Jersey, you can say, my kids are here all the time, and their non-custodial parent is not taking them because the non-custodial parent can't do homeschooling, or they have to also work, and so they're not available. And so, yeah, that person only has 50 overnights now. And I have the bulk of the overnights. I need an adjustment. At least there's some kind of relief in the state of New Jersey. State of New York, they're just acting like nothing is going on because the statute doesn't allow them to address it at all.
Right. And even in New Jersey, the statute allows the court to make temporary adjustment to child support. You can do a stay. If it's appropriate, you can do a temporary reduction. There's a couple of things that they're allowed to do in order to make sure that, the primary purpose of child support is to make sure the kids are being supported.
Right. That is the primary purpose of child support, to make sure that they are stable, that their household is stable. And I'll tell you, you've heard me rant about this. You've probably seen my rant on my office Facebook page, but a lot of these clients are not getting their issues addressed now by the family court. If they were married, or if they have the money to do it, they can go to Supreme Court and they can get some kind of relief, because Supreme Court is fully up and running and fully taking cases, even though it's remote. But the family court is not. The family court is not taking any of these new applications unless there's some kind of emergency. Now, we have been able to get family court cases that are already in the pipeline to have their modifications, etc. Any new family court cases, we have been successful at filing orders to show cause, which are emergency applications, and asking the court to put the case on the calendar. But I will tell you that most people who are pro se, which means that they represent themselves, they're not so inclined to be filing all of that documentation because they don't know how, or they're afraid that they're going to mess up. And so they're also behind the 8 ball if they've had this modification event, but they can't afford to file the order to show cause because they need an attorney to do so.
So let me ask you, in New Jersey, the judges are very strict about orders to show cause for financial reasons. So if the person is not paying child support, depending on the circumstance, that normally will just, if it's just a plain hasn't paid in a few months, you have to file a motion. You can't file an order to show cause.
That's right.
Is that the same in New York?
No. And I will tell you,
there has to be
that I cut my teeth first in the state of New Jersey. And, so when I came to the state of New York and people were just filing orders to show cause like it was water, I'm like, and I would never file an order to show cause because it just was wrong, right? Because I was trained in New Jersey. Yeah. And then I was like, well, if these fools are going to be filing these orders to show cause, I might as well just join the gang. But orders to show cause in the state of New York If they are true emergencies, then they have what we call interim relief set forth in them. And you have to, if you're in Supreme Court, you have to give notice to the other side, depending upon the court rules, but you have to give notice, the part rules, but you have to give notice. For most judges, they want you to give notice 24 hours before you file, so that the other side knows that they should be showing up, or that something is going to be filed in their absence if they don't show up, right? And so that's a true emergency where you're like, judge, not only are you going to sign this because you got it, but you're also going to say that, Homer has to do X, Y, Z, right? And you're going to,
that's like not going to be turned off in the winter or something like that, right?
Or orders of protection, or you need to have an injunction against somebody taking all of the money out of the bank account, or like I filed the other day for a suspension of parenting time because the father in that case did something that concerns the mother for the child's safety. In those situations, you can file your order to show cause and have interim relief. But otherwise, people just file orders to show cause all the time around here, like it's nothing.
So let me tell you this. I had a case very, very recently where I wanted to freeze some money that had been taken out of an account. Denied because it was only about money.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know how much money it was, but if it must have been enough for you to.
It was six-figure money.
Oh no, that's an emergency. That's an emergency. If you can buy a house with the money, it's an emergency.
I was anticipating the pushback because I know the judges have issues with orders to show cause about money. And this was money, but it's a lot of money. This is life savings money. And so I had my case law. I had everything prepared. I said, it's really not just about this. Money can't. And I had my beautiful arguments. And I was like, I'm overcoming his objections. I thought he was buying into it.
He was swaying with you like, He was like, if it was my money, yes, but it's not. And so therefore,
and his denied. Correct. Denied. And the only basis was, this is only about money. At some point, you'll be able to get a judgment for this money. So,
but the money gone. The money's gone. I don't care about a judgment and by the way, the way our judgments rock is that you're only going to be getting about 10% of the free available income from somebody if they have a real job. If they don't have a regular job, you're not getting anything. You're getting double sales. Nothing. Nothing. So come on. My judge, may he rest in peace, my judge would have signed an order to show cause for something like that. He would not have signed an order to show cause about you not getting your support, but he would have signed an order to show cause about somebody moving 6 figures from bank accounts.
Yep. And it really, like, in my opinion, it really could have been just freeze it temporarily.
Yeah.
And then bring us in immediately and make us have a mini hearing about the topic.
You're right, because in New Jersey, so that everybody understands this, in New Jersey, the motion cycle is 24 days.
Right.
So that's 24 days from start to finish. Oh, and that's not 24 days if people file for adjournments. So now your 24 days could go to 36 days, could go to 48 days, could go to...
Which are all
where is the money in that? Where's the money?
Yep.
I don't want to hear nothing about no daggone judgment. See, people, see, this is how people get hurt. I'm not inciting violence, but I'm just saying this is how people get hurt.
No, I mean, there's there's practicality to some of these things. Bring the person in and have my client was devastated, could not understand. And I said, what do I say? We talked about this before. Sometimes you have to have these hard conversations with your client. And it really was a terrible conversation to have and say, look, I talked to you about this in advance. We talked about the money issue. I wouldn't have brought it if I didn't think we would be successful, because I absolutely thought I could overcome it given the large amount of money and how it came out of the various accounts. So it was, a calculated thing that happened after the filing of divorce, but before the service of a complaint. all of like, come on.
Yep. So now let me just say something. Now this is not what the show is about, people, but since we've already talked about that, let me just say that this is where folks start to say, oh, I don't know if I want to take all of the money out. This is where I say, okay, don't take all the money out, take half. Because here's the deal. As long as you take half of the money and you safeguard half of the money and you only use the money for what you normally would have used the money for. Hey, Zumba,
hey,
we talking about stealing your money, Zumba. Stealing the money. If you only use it for what you normally would have used it for, as long as it was in a joint account, this is your money. You're not gonna. People are scared. They're like, "Oh, I don't want anything to happen to me. I don't want the judge to think this of me." I'm like, "Well, we'll tell the judge that I told you to take the money out. Mm-hmm. I told you to take it out. You were listening to advice of counsel." There was one case that I had that this lady had like $500,000 in an account. And she was really scared that her husband was going to take the money out, mm-hmm. and so scared to the point where she actually stayed in the abusive relationship. She decided that she wasn't going to go forward with the case because she was so concerned that her husband was going to run off with this money. And I remember when I was working in Monmouth County and I was a baby lawyer, mm-hmm. I remember representing this medical doctor who had turned a stay-at-home mom, and her husband took everything out of the account and left her with 18 cents. Oh. 18 cents. Can you imagine? I mean, what? Took her off of the Amex, took her off of it was crazy. And this is where, if you're going to be plaintiff and you're going to be making moves, once you get that divorce complaint filed and you know that person is served, you better go get your money. You better go get your money because I don't know how you're going to get it later.
Yeah. And by the way, look, if you're taking half, as long as you're not taking half that's going to be necessary to pay bills or something, that would be a problem. But it's going to be distributed anyway. And as long as it's traceable, you're not like hiding it under your mattress or something and saying, oh, I don't know what happened to it. Spent it on marital expenses.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, people do that with engagement rings. And then I'm like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to hide. You don't have to have lost the engagement ring. It's yours. As long as you got married, it's yours. Yeah. People do that. Have you had that happen? Oh, I don't know where the engagement ring is. The engagement ring is worth like 50 grand, 25 grand. People are like, I don't know. I have no idea where the
Yes. I have something.
It's your engagement ring, okay? As long as y'all got married, it's yours. You don't have to hide it.
I have actually some missing jewelry currently going on in the case.
So sometimes I really do want to go to people's house and be like, let me see where the jewelry is. But in reality, we're not going to do that most likely. So, it's not fun, because I love jewelry. So I'm very serious about my jewelry. Yeah. And I would be too perturbed if my jewelry went missing like that. Yeah. But yeah, things go missing all the time in these cases.
The nonchalant way this person said that this piece of $20,000 jewelry went missing makes me think that it's not actually missing.
It's not missing. Not missing. Yeah, girl, it's in the car. It's probably in the car. Everything is in the car. When you go through a divorce, everybody puts everything in the car.
By the way, so I would tell people when I have consults and stuff, we're totally off topic by now, but I'm putting stuff in the car. I'm like, make sure you make copies of all of the tax returns, bank statements, everything that you think you need, because if you think you're going to get locked out of that information, take it down, get it. And I'm like, and don't leave it in the trunk of your car if he has your car keys and can get in there, because he'll go and look for it, or she'll go and look for it. Like, take it to your girlfriend's house, your friend's house, your neighbor's house, whatever. Mm-hmm.
That's right. All of those important documents, because it's amazing how nobody knows where anything is when they're supposed to. Nobody knows. Everybody, only the shadow knows. There was a TV show, The Shadow Knows. Only the shadow knows where the stuff is.
We used to listen to it in school. Yeah. But also with all of those important papers, they're really important because you need them to calculate your child support too. So when you're
Absolutely.
looking about, depending on what your income is, if it fluctuates, you might need 5 years of tax returns to figure out what the child support number is going to be. Or at the very minimum, you'll need, the previous year's tax documents in order to prove what both of you make for the calculation.
And you know what? Let's give the people a little bit more, right? Because you said something about, the calculations of the tax returns. Let's give people a little bit more. How does New Jersey calculate fluctuating incomes, right? So if somebody who has a regular job, we're not talking about somebody who has a business or a 1099 income even.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about that they have a range of incomes over the last few years.
So they will take, if there's a range of it, well, let me backtrack. If there's a range of incomes for the last few years, they'll usually take an average, a 3 to a 5 year average, depending on what it is. If your income is fluctuating, but it's usually mainly going up, they'll probably take the most recent year's income if it's like W-2 income. If it's bonus income, they're definitely going to want to do an average because bonuses and commissions vary.
Yeah. So the way that differs in the state of New York is that, our statute says that we go by the last year's income, right?
Period.
So, unless you're going to show that there's something else happening this year. So for instance, I got W-2s earlier this week from an adversary who I know in 2019 made 90 something $1,000, right? This week, I got W-2s for $51,000. So now my inquiry is, my thing is not to ask the court to average because our courts really don't do that anyway. Mm-hmm. But and there's no statutory provision for that. But to see what is going on now, because I don't know. I mean, I know that 2020 was what it was, mm-hmm. But my suspicion is that the person is making more now. So even though the statute says that we're going to go on the last year's W-2s, I can sometimes curtail that or derail it and get the prospective income imputed to the person for the purpose of figuring out what the spousal support and child support is going to be.
Right. That's good. That's good. I mean, and we also look at that. We look at the current income. So it actually is written right into the child support guidelines, depending on where we're at in the year when we're looking at child support. So if we're in June, we're going to be looking at your pay stubs to figure out how we're going to calculate child support. We don't even care what you made the previous tax year because we want to see your pay stubs and see what you've made this current year. If it's previous, you're looking at, February, we're going to be looking at your W-2s.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that's different too from New York and New Jersey, I guess.
Well, listen, New York has a full on New Jersey has a full on guideline. Right. I mean, New York just has a calculation, mm-hmm. right? And we talk about what is income and things like that. But New Jersey will get down into the nitty gritty of what percentage of child support is presumed to go for housing, what percentage is presumed to go for for transportation. I mean, it's really very detailed, and that's something that New York doesn't have. You can turn to the New Jersey child support guidelines to get answers to half or 3/4 of most of your questions that you're going to have.
They're thick. The appendix for the child support guidelines are really thick, and they do go into a ton of detail. They talk about how the calculation came about, and you're right. They talk about the percentages. Earlier, you mentioned about uncovered medical expenses, and they figure that an intact family, the custodial parent should pay the first $250 per child per year. And all of it's painstaking to read, but it has a ton of detail, and it does include extracurricular expenses in there as well. There's extraordinary expenses that you could add on top of it, and some people, depending on how much they make, will agree to extracurriculars, or saying the first couple $100 of extras per child are going to be included in child support, but anything over and above that, because people there's travel hockey, I know, is really expensive.
Travel cheerleading.
Yeah. Oh my cheerleading's ridiculous.
Cheerleading is crazy. How people are spending $15,000 on cheerleading.
Oh my gosh.
And that might not even include the travel.
Yeah.
Woo! If my child has to go if she wants to do we gotta have to take up a collection, because no. Woo, that's expensive. It's expensive.
It's really
they might have to include mommy cheerleading if we're gonna pay that amount of money, because I might as well entertain everybody and get entertained for the 15 grand. Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna stop by your house with my pom poms. I'm gonna stop by. Everybody gonna see me. It's a D. I don't know. Everybody.
We'll have a GoFundMe for cheer.
Thank you all so much for watching. As usual, we had a great time. Nicole did. And whoever else is watching that didn't chime in, y'all better chime in next time so that we know you are watching.
We do. We like to see the comments, and it makes us, at least we know somebody's listening other than us. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a great night. Share and like.
See you next Thursday.